So excited to talk about stress. I love talking about stress and educating my patients and how it actually, it's affecting the body in so many ways and it's so silent, it's invisible. So let's dive into it. So I'm going to start with a quote. Stress has been referred to as the health epidemic of the 21st century. And I've shared that a lot, but what does it really mean? What does stress mean for you? And we'll go into that as well. You know, is it the anxiety? Is it the fear? Is it the long to-do list? And what is it actually saying to you? Why are we living the way we're living today? So I've said that a lot, and people still thrive on stress, to be honest with you. A lot of people say, I get a lot of things done, I get my dopamine hit, I'm achieving lots, it's okay to stay up late and do get the achievements. But what is it actually doing to our body? So the next quote, if I say to you, chronic stress is just as likely to increase your risk of a heart attack as being type 2 diabetic, what does that say to yourself? And that was quoted by Aseem Malhotra, a renowned cardiologist and author of The Statin-Free Life. And when I heard that, I go, I need to share this information with patients because we talk about stress as almost appreciated, and people, love saying, I work really hard. I spent 80 hours this week working, and we almost give it a gold medal. But what exactly is it doing after years and years of just long hours or that living with chronic stress? And that's where we want to go into, because stress at the end of the day, it's designed to protect us and to look after us. For example, like when you cross the road, we need to have a bit of stress so we don't kill ourselves. But it's the chronic stress that I'm talking about, the day-to-day living on edge as though, you're in fear mode. So we're going to go into it. So the three key areas I'm going to talk about, first of all, just really go through the stress reaction. What is actually happening in our body? And it's always really good to know, because we live almost in our head, almost automatic some days, just going through the emotions. So it's really nice to know what exactly is happening in our stress reaction in our body. Then we're going to go through a couple of really interesting facts on how it affects our body internally. And lastly, going through some really three simple strategies that you can reduce stress today, that you can actually start from today to help with the stress reduction. So let's just take a moment. It's been a long weekend. You've had a lot of information, but let's take a moment just to reflect how your week was. Do we actually take some time to reflect on what our life is like? Are we in auto mode of, got to take my kids to all of these events in the weekend, I've got my emails to check? One patient said to me she receives at least 200 emails a day. I've got lots of phone calls to do. I've got so many projects to work on. I have so many patients who not only working, but they're studying, and then they're starting a side business. How are we living our lives today? I think it's just take a moment just to sit back and think, what are we doing? How was your week? And is it filled with long to-do lists? Are we actually having joy in the week? I say to my patients, do you have moments of joy? Are you looking forward to things? Are you doing things for yourself? And I just spoke to one of my patients yesterday who's just overwhelmed, who's got gut issues, who's just not feeling any motivation. She is the main breadwinner. She's got 3 kids. She works a highly stressful job, and she comes home late and she goes, I'm so exhausted. I don't want to feel like this anymore. And I was just inquiring, and I go, is there anything in the week that you look forward to, that you're doing for yourself? And she laughed. And it's almost a common story these days of, are we looking after ourselves? Are we filling up our cup? Or are we spending our time giving our time and energy to other people? And is it time to look within? So what is exactly happening in our body at the time of stress? And this is the chronic stress reaction. And it starts with a feeling. It starts with a thought. So the thought could be, this is fearful. I am fearing something. I need to get out of here. So a whole series of reactions take place in your body. So it starts with a thought, I'm not feeling too comfortable, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling a bit of fear, perhaps it's anxiety, and it sends signals from the amygdala. So the amygdala is a gland in your brain that detects fear. And that's where all the signals start. So it then sends a message to the hypothalamus, which then sends signals to the adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys. And they secrete the cortisol, the adrenaline, noradrenaline, which then sends messages throughout the body. And this is when we get the symptoms of perhaps the sweaty palms, the palpitations when your heart's racing, the dry mouth. I mean, it's actually designed to protect us, to get out of a situation that's fearful. So we want to increase blood flow to the legs. We want to pump those muscles up so you can flee the area instead of pumping blood into the gut. And as a result, digestion is not at a time of importance during times of stress. So the body knows what it's doing. It says, I need to get out of this situation. So I'm going to help you. I'm going to pump up that blood in the heart. I'm going to improve the blood flow to the legs. Let's get you out of this place. So it was designed for our survival. But let's take a moment and say, what's actually happening in today's world? Why are we triggering the stress response in today's world? What kind of emotions are triggering the stress response? So is it fear? Is it embarrassment? Is it shame? Is it guilt? And what are we feeling on a day-to-day basis? So a little fun fact about the amygdala, which I often say to patients, and research has actually shown, so the amygdala is the one that detects the fear, detects those emotions. And it's really interesting, after years and years and years of living a life of that chronic stress, fear, low-level anxiety, that can become your baseline. So what they're saying now is amygdala goes back to your baseline, and your baseline is whatever that is familiar to you. So that's really, really important. So if fear and living in anxiety or the stress response is normal for you, that's your familiarity, that is actually your baseline. And I often see this. Perhaps you grew up in a home environment that was a bit stressful, or people around you were quite heightened in their emotions. You grew up with that fear response, and that became your baseline. But what's really important is that people could be living like this for years and years and years. So it's time to just sort of sit back and go, am I feeling fear as my norm? Like waking up going, what do I need to do? Where do I need to go? Where do I need to be? Am I doing all of these tasks? And what am I doing this for? So it's nice to take a moment and say, what are your triggers? What triggers that fear response? And have we normalized it? Do we know how to feel calm? And I've got an interesting story to tell you. I was chatting to a patient who 50 years of living with anxiety, and, good on her. She was taking action. She was seeing a psychologist. She's working on exercise. She's working on all these lifestyle measures to help with it. But we had such an interesting conversation when she said, I was scared of not feeling anxious because I've been feeling anxious all my life, and I don't know what calm feels like. Anxiety is what I'm used to. So it really opened my eyes to go, wow, how many of us are living with that chronic fear from childhood, from teenage years, from uni years, from young adult years, of that fear of getting things done, fear of pleasing other people, fear of meeting other people's expectations. Fear can come in so many different ways, and all of them are triggering the stress response. So that's something to think about. And more importantly, we can rewire. We can do something about it. We can rewire the amygdala to feeling calm. And it's an amazing feeling. So this is something we need to look at. It's the autonomic nervous system. And it's something we've sort of actually forgotten about, to be honest. So I talked about the cortisol, the adrenaline, noradrenaline. We've got this amazing nervous system in our body that is designed to protect us, which is that whole sympathetic nervous system. And it's connected to so many different parts of the body. So it's triggered during the stress response, and it's designed to protect us. So increasing our heart rate and all sorts of other things happen. As you can see, it's connected to so many different parts of the body. And that's where the link of what chronic stress can have an impact on your health is due, because it is connected. The sympathetic nervous system is connected. So what I often say is, imagine the sympathetic nervous system as your gas pedal in your car. It's always switched on, it's always turned on. We're almost living, daily in that fight or flight response, be it a low level. What we've forgotten is the opposite nervous system, the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve, which is the largest nerve of the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's designed to do the opposite. Our body is incredible. The human body is incredible. It's got ways of healing itself, and it's designed for a balance. So, yep, we're aware of how we can speed things up and in that nervous system. But have we forgotten the beautiful vagus nerve and the parasympathetic of how to slow things down? And so this is something to keep in mind as we look at the different strategies to help us feel better. So yes, it's all about the balancing the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic. At the end of the day, this is what we're trying to achieve. How often are we in that fight or flight mode? And you may not realize it. For example, checking emails, some people hold their breath. Some people actually, are breathing shallow during checking emails, or, you've had a stressful meeting, or you are going to have to speak to someone that is confrontational. That all can trigger the sympathetic response. So it's just being conscious. How often are we in the stress response in the day? How much have we normalized that? And how can we switch to the parasympathetic? And these are some really key strategies that we will move on to. We can do it. We've got the switch to go into parasympathetic, go into the vagus nerve, to go into calm. We just need to teach ourselves how to do it. We can rewire. So it's really, really interesting about the different ways the body can be affected. So there's so many different ways. And it's really interesting. So it's all about that fight or flight response connected to different parts of the body. So it can affect our gut. I don't know if you've heard of irritable bowel syndrome. So that's when our bowels can move from diarrhea to constipation, and it is directly linked to the sympathetic nervous system. So thoughts, fear can affect our gut directly. That's one. It can directly affect our thyroid and how that behaves. It can affect our emotions, living with chronic anxiety. It can affect our sleep, causing insomnia. So there's a multitude of symptoms that when we live with this chronic stress that we don't realize is actually how it's affecting us internally. And of course, as I mentioned, what Aseem Malhotra said, it can even give you a heart attack. And this is something that we don't really talk about. When was the last time, you went to see your GP and you talked about, people fear about heart attacks, they talk about cholesterol. But in that same conversation, when do we talk about stress and how much stress that you're in, that you're in? So it's just a great reminder about how our body is responding to this chronic stress response. The gas pedal always turned on. We're not nourishing our body in terms of the vagus nerve and what the ultimate effect is. So I really wanted to share this slide, actually. It was brilliant. I follow the Glucose Goddess on Instagram. She's a biochemist, and she wrote this brilliant book, The Glucose Revolution. I think it's a brilliant read. It's full of handy tips, and it gives you a great insight about sugar. And especially this is all about the low carb weekend. So I had to put this in because, when we think about stress and how it's affecting our body, we may not actually have any symptoms. It's very much invisible until years and years of stress. And that's when I see patients with the effects of chronic stress. So when this slide came and I go, wow, this is a brilliant slide, because I wanted to show my patients, what happens in a regular meeting versus a stressful meeting to our sugar. So, we talk about low carb, we talk about what we're eating, but are we talking about cortisol and how that's pushing up our sugar? And I see many, many women with difficulty losing weight. We go through hormones, we go through insulin, we go through thyroid, we go through estrogen, especially during perimenopause. As estrogen declines, insulin goes up. How often do we talk about cortisol? And it's almost hard to convince someone cortisol is doing this to you internally in terms of the sugar response. And it is really hard to understand because we don't really feel it. We've normalized it, like what we've mentioned before. So what are the hidden effects of cortisol on your sugar? And so patients love looking at that going, wow, what's actually happening in my day on a day-to-day basis? How much of this is actually my stress response rather than what I'm eating? But I'm going to share with you another slide. It's a great story, actually. It's a great story of one of my patients. He's type 2 diabetic and he is on his way of reversing it. So he's motivated, he's ready. So he's attacked his food, and occasionally he slips up. But we always have a conversation about stress. So he's in his mid-40s, he's married, he's happy, he's got 2 young children. He loves his job, he thrives on his job, but he knows it's super stressful. So funnily enough, he was aware that I always connect, stress and sugar. And so he's been monitoring his sugars. And he said, Shami, I've got a really funny story to tell you. I'm an avid AFL fan and my club lost. And out of curiosity, I wanted to check my blood sugars straight after. And he was shocked to see a sharp rise in his sugars. And yet he wasn't eating. He hadn't eaten for about a couple of hours. And he couldn't believe the rise in his sugar because he was stressed about the result. And he had a moment of reflection. And it was just a great time for us to sit and reflect on how we're living our lives these days. How are we choosing to live our lives as well? Do we choose the stressful jobs to buy the certain expensive things do we want a busy life at the expense of our health? And this was the exact question he started asking himself. And his wife has been on this beautiful journey as well, and realized the impact of stress on her health, and has taken a year out. And they're both having a conversation about this. What is the impact of stress on our health? We're only in our 40s. He's already a type 2 diabetic. Fair enough. He had he had to work on his diet and various other factors, but stress was definitely contributing to his sugar rise. So it was a great time just to sit back and just reflect, how are we leading it? What's the impact of stress on our body? So this is another, it's a busy slide, but what I really wanted to share on this slide was another patient who loves data collection. Thank you, because this is brilliant data. So he had the Freestyle Libre, the sensor on to monitor his sugars because he's got high cholesterol, and so we're looking at that. But he also suffers from anxiety. So he said, right, I am going to check my levels of anxiety through the score, and at the same time, I'm going to monitor my sugar levels and see what's happening about it. And it correlated. It correlated to when there was high anxiety, there was also a spike in sugar. So there's like real life data. There's a funny story around this. So I said, oh yeah, when did you take these readings and what were you doing at the time? And you're going to laugh. So he was traveling to Sydney, and this was at the airport. And literally, the spike in sugar was passing through security. And both of us had a good old laugh about that. And, it was so funny just to think, where are we, getting triggered? A simple passing through security has spiked his sugar because he felt quite anxious about it. And now every time I think I pass through security, I'm just going to laugh of what that kind of environment is doing. So this is just one example. And it's such a great reminder of wow, where else in our life are we triggering a stress response? And is that directly actually linking to sugar? And we all know, as part of low carb fans, what the impact of sugar is. So that was just a great moment to think about. So a quick recap: the stress reaction we talked about, the effects of stress on your body we went through, and something really to highlight: sugar, heart attacks. We don't really talk about it when we go and see our doctor. We tend to link stress with mental health a lot, but in actual fact, it's actually doing a lot more in our body, from gut health, thyroid, to weight, a multitude of issues, and it's sort of silently doing its thing. So now we are going to talk about some strategies. And this is where, just to remind ourselves about that sympathetic, the autonomic nervous system. So just a reminder, the vagus nerve, this is a name I will be pulling up quite a bit. We've forgotten about it. It's amazing. It's an amazing tool in our body. We need to trigger it. How do we switch the vagus nerve on to allow us to lower that heart rate, to make us feel better, to make us feel calmer? And funnily enough, the vagus nerve it's connected to the gut, and it increases blood flow. It has a direct impact on the gut. When we're feeling calmer, it improves our digestion. So just a reminder about that vagus nerve. So number one is breathe. How are we breathing right now? Are we breathing shallow or deeply? And it's something that you can actually check right now. So one hand on your chest and one hand on your tummy. And I want you to take a nice deep breath in and just observe what rises first. Is it your tummy or your chest? And the answer is, I want your tummy to rise first. And it's 9 times out of 10 patients who come in through my door, they are shallow breathing. They're in the fight or flight response, they're in chronic stress, and they are breathing here. So what does that actually mean? That actually means you're using half of your lungs, but you're not activating the vagus nerve. And when you take a nice deep breath, inflating the lungs fully, you're activating the vagus nerve. And that means things are starting to calm down, the lowering of that cortisol. You're feeling calmer, you're feeling better, you're increasing your oxygen. How often are we shallow breathing through the day? We've taught ourselves to shallow breathe over the years. And I always say, when you see babies breathe, look at that beautiful tummy rising. We want to get back to that. We can rewire, retrain the way we breathe. And it's because of habits of the stress response, we've learned to shallow breathe most of the day. And one patient said to me, wow, Shami, that's such a simple tool. She's a lawyer, highly stressed, has a tough job, and she's just using that beautiful shallow breathe and that beautiful deep breathing throughout the day. So that's what I say often. In order to rewire the brain, we need to keep reminding it. So not to just do a bit of breath work in the morning or breath work in the evening. We've got to constantly remind the brain. And that means create strategies or cues to remind ourselves, to catch ourselves in how we breathe. So are we deep breathing throughout the day? So for example, if you're at desk space, maybe put a post-it note on your laptop, or every time you want to have to open an email, take a nice deep breath in. Before you go into a meeting, take some lovely deep breaths in, and just sit and observe how you feel. What's happening to your body? How are you feeling? And you're just giving yourself so much more energy. And also, we're going to move on to the next tip, but also just see how you feel at the end of the day. Do you have more energy? Do you have more time for your kids? Do you have more time for focus and concentration? How do you feel? And I mentioned it previously, actually. There's a study being done how, when you check emails, it's something called email apnea, where you actually stop breathing. And it just makes us think how we're using our breath to manage our stress. And we're shallow breathing because that's what we taught ourselves in the fear response. So it's time to rewire, time to take some beautiful deep breaths in. So this is where the vagus nerve is so, so important. So I go, breath work is great for triggering the vagus nerve. But this is a beautiful list of strategies to trigger the vagus nerve, to switch you from sympathetic to parasympathetic. So meditation, singing, humming, chanting, cold exposure, some cold showers for 1 minute can help. Massage, socializing, exercising, being in nature. So I often say to patients, how can we implement this in our day-to-day? So we've got always something to keep us going back to the vagus nerve. We can't live a life without stress. It's going to happen. This acute stress response is important. It actually sometimes motivates us and it keeps us alive. But we don't want to constantly be on it. And our body is not designed to constantly be in that stress response. So how can we adopt some of these strategies? How can you adopt some of these strategies in your day-to-day? For example, do you love singing? Are you singing in the car or are you singing in the shower? Some of my patients love the cold showers. Are you having regular massages? Are we connecting? How human connection is so important. And is it that incidental conversations that you have when you're buying your coffee or, with a receptionist or, people that you meet? Are you having conversations? Are we interacting as humans? That self-regulates, that triggers the vagus nerve. Exercising, we're going to go into that, but movement, are you moving? And if you're living in cities, how often do you see trees and nature? Can you get to a park? Can you sit in nature? It is so healing as well. So we're being pretty smart. We're biohacking. We're trying to figure out, how do I initiate the vagus nerve without even thinking about it? How do I create a routine in my day that I've actually got strategies in place to calm the nervous system down? And often we need strategies. We need to make it into a routine because life gets in the way. Next thing, sleep. Wow, sleep is so important. If that's the only thing you take away from this talk, make sleep the priority of your day. It's the most important part of the day. And it's really interesting how it's the first thing to let go when you're stressed, because our mind is wandering, ruminating thoughts. I was reading somewhere how natural that is when, as humans, because we're animals, when there is a problem, we naturally want to stay awake because we have to solve that problem. It's urgent, it's a priority. So we're designed that way. But is today problems actually a priority? Can we learn to switch off? So it's the quickest thing, easiest thing to give up. And perhaps, we're sleeping late because we are so-called relaxing with the TV or screen time. And this is something I'm going to go into. So sleep is so important when it comes to stress management. And this is an example of, and I remind my patients, you can actually, figure out what your cortisol is doing in 4 times in the day. Yes, you can do a blood morning cortisol, but you can do urine cortisol and test it 4 times in the day. And I'm really interested to see what cortisol is happening in the day, in the night. And this is our circadian rhythm, which switches you into sleep and wake cycle. And what I want to remind us all is that the peak of cortisol is at 9 in the morning, and our body is designed to get ready for bed from 9 in the morning. It starts to decrease gradually and to get ready for bed. And from 6 p.m., melatonin climbs up, and it's just getting you ready for this beautiful sleep that's so nourishing. And so when we look at strategies and look at ways of things affecting sleep, just to remind ourselves that our body is designed for that peak at 9 and not really chronic peaks throughout the day. And what are the triggers for raising your cortisol throughout the day? Is it the stress response? Is it screen time? So many other things can trigger that cortisol rise when it's not designed for that. So 2 things about sleep is what makes us sleepy switches you into the sleep cycle is melatonin. So it's produced in the pineal gland. It triggers the event of sleep. And what's really important is it switches you into the sleep cycle. But what keeps us asleep is actually adenosine. And adenosine is produced in our cells, and its role is to make you sleepy. And it gradually rises in the day as long as you're awake, and it falls around 7 a.m. on waking. And believe it or not, caffeine blocks adenosine receptors. So that's why it keeps you alert. And just on a sideline, so if you're a very quick caffeine metabolizer, so you take your morning coffee, gets you awake, it's blocked those adenosine sleepy receptors, and you metabolize it quickly, you can get a slump of energy in the afternoon, like a dip of energy, and you're feeling really drowsy and lethargic because the caffeine's removed itself from the receptors and adenosine is flooding it, and you just feel so sleepy. So that's something to bear in mind. And of course, exercise increases those levels of adenosine. That literally makes you sleepy. So what keeps you awake? And this is just a great reminder, and it's something I touched upon: screen time. I have this conversation a lot. It's so addictive. It is fun, it's exciting, it triggers our dopamine. It's hard to put down, but it is triggering your cortisol at night. It is having a massive impact, and that means you're not sleeping deeply at all. And if you remember that graph, you're triggering your cortisol at night, and the body's not designed for that. So I always say at least 1 hour before bed to turn off all screens, have a beautiful night sleep routine, which could be just listening to music or journaling or meditation or a lovely bath or a shower, and create a beautiful sleep routine which doesn't involve screens. And just observe. I always say to patients, just observe how you're feeling. How was your sleep that night? Did you sleep so much deeper? That means, did you wake up feeling great and so much more energy? And as you know, stress can keep us awake, just those ruminating thoughts. And it's really quite good just to spend time and strategize, like, how do I manage those thoughts? What strategies can help? Mentioned caffeine and alcohol as well. So caffeine is interesting because some may say, well, I can drink coffee and go to bed. That's great. I metabolize it really quickly. But caffeine, there's another gene that can produce your adrenaline quickly, and another gene that says get rid of adrenaline slowly. So caffeine stimulates adrenaline. And so are we in that false fight or flight response as a result of our caffeine intake? So it's something to bear in mind. Anyone with that high anxiety, I always have a great conversation about caffeine, trying to do a trial without for at least 3 weeks. It can last 3 weeks in the system. And just see how you feel. And more often than not, they come back, go, I can't believe caffeine was doing that to me. It was just falsely triggering my fight or flight response. And I'm feeling calmer now. As a result, I'm sleeping better. As a result, I'm making better decisions. I've got more focus, concentration. I'm happier. And it's this amazing domino effect. Got to say something about alcohol. So, often alcohol, social, or is it used to de-stress? Alcohol does have an effect on your REM sleep. It has an effect the next day. It can trigger anxiety. If anyone knows about Andrew Uberman and his podcast about alcohol, it's a fantastic one on that. And it actually transformed my patient. And she actually was drinking a lot of alcohol that she was finding hard to give, and now she's off it, which is amazing. So alcohol, in that moment, you feel that you're relaxing, but it has all these after effects from sleep to giving you anxiety the very next day as well. So, and lastly, number 3, movement. Did you move today? Like, how often are we sitting in a chair for how many hours? And it's not only sitting on our desk, waking up, sitting for breakfast, sitting for meal times, sitting in public transport, sitting in our cars, sitting after dinner. How many hours are we actually spending sitting in a week? And it's quite scary when we actually add it all together. So movement is so important, and it only takes 5 minutes of movement to increase our serotonin, our happy chemicals. So, and that's what I say to patients: it's such a short time. Move for mental health. It's not about weight loss, it's moving for mental health. And we're leading such sedentary lives. And there's so many hidden benefits for movement, which I'm going to go into next. So it's called the miracle grow for the brain. It's the brain-derived neurotrophic factor. And it actually maintains brain cells as well as grow new ones when you exercise. And so there's so many other hidden benefits of exercise. So movement for mental health, but learning, memory, increasing your serotonin. It only takes 5 minutes to increase your serotonin. And funnily enough, to get more BDNF is not only exercise, meditation, sleep, and sunlight. And what lowers BDNF is stress and sugar and social isolation. So that's really interesting, isn't it? It's all interconnected. It's all related. So a quick recap. We talked about the wonderful stress reaction designed to protect us. But in today's world, are we on overdrive? Are we in the chronic stress response that our body is not designed for at all? And so we have to remind ourselves about this beautiful vagus nerve. Our human body is designed to actually heal. And so how can we move to the vagus nerve? And we talked about lots of strategies. For example, from breathing, a simple technique, you can even take a moment now and see how you breathe. Deep breathing throughout the day. Are we moving more? And so I often say to patients, design your environment so you do move. Maybe you have to stand and go to the printer, stand and go and get a glass of water, do walk and talk meetings, go for a walk and have a meeting. Find so many other ways that you're moving. Your body is not designed to sit still, and that has a direct impact on all your happy chemicals. And then we talked about sleep. Make sleep a priority, and that means it's almost removing the things that are affecting sleep, from caffeine to alcohol to screen time. That's something really major, and you won't believe it, but these simple strategies can transform the way you feel, really transform the way you feel. And lastly, of course, the effects of stress on our body. Why are we doing what we're doing? We want to feel better. We want to look after our health. And unfortunately, stress has a silent, invisible impact on our body until it's too late. And that's when we see all the chronic diseases or the impact of chronic stress. And it's just a great reminder: heart health, diabetes, sugar, thyroid, gut. And, when I reflect, what inspires people to take action is there's a pain point, there's a tipping point. And unfortunately, stress, we celebrate it in today's world. You're rewarded in so many ways, from maybe it's accolades to monetary to titles, to even talking about in your communities of how great your stress is because you've achieved so much. But what is it actually doing internally? Can we change that narrative and support one another to actually look after our bodies and say, yeah, there is a stress response, but can we do it differently? Can we actually look after our bodies until it's, I wouldn't say too late, because there's always a way, but why do we need to wait till pre-diabetes? Why do we need to wait till insulin resistance to actually do something about it? So it's time to reflect and go, what are your motivators? What's important for you in terms of your health? Is stress actually something that you need to actually address and do something about? Awesome. So that comes to the end of my talk. I'm at the Mint Clinic, which I've just opened up in the last 6 weeks. I've got a great ebook there. It's the Ultimate Beginner's Guide to Integrative Medicine. When you go on the website, right at the bottom, it's a 30-page booklet, really easy to read. I also host the Six Hats podcast. It's all about just getting that message out there, awareness of stress, how it impacts our body, what can we do about it, why do we need to wait for illness? Let's do something about it now. So lots and lots of inspiring talks. And I need to get Tracy on that podcast as well. And I'm on Instagram. And lastly, so this is where I am in Collingwood. And we're just so excited to create a beautiful space for healing, transforming the way we do medicine. It's collaborative. It's warm, it's inviting, it's friendly, and it's about solutions. Thank you, Tracy.
Oh, Dr. Shami, thank you so much. That was amazing. Let me just move that out so I can chat to you. I think the way you practice medicine is so inspiring, and wouldn't it be wonderful if that was how all doctors practice medicine? But I think there's hope for the future in the fact that people like you, do practice in the way you do. I found that incredible. I think it's so invisible. to people, stress, as you said, and we can't see the immediate impact. Most of us don't even, we're not even aware, right, of it happening. And actually, one of the questions that's come in is, the fact that, we can't avoid it, right? Life is stressful. And if we try to avoid it, we're going to create more stress for ourselves. So there's a level of acceptance there that we have to find. But can you talk about how maybe how we can interpret stress? Like, is there ever a good stress or a bad stress?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's really interesting, the good stress and bad stress. You're right, because good stress will motivate you to prepare for a meeting, to get things done, to achieve, because it's that fear of like, oh, I need to get it done. Fair enough. I think where I'm going at is the holding on to it, ruminating about it, never stop talking about it, and just see in your body how you're feeling. Are you shallow breathing? Are you tensing your muscles? We actually create all these strategies without realizing. Clenching teeth is another one. Clenching teeth, headaches, we've normalized it. And until we sort of do like a body scan, we realize, oh my God, I'm actually carrying the stress that I'm not realizing. So neck, shoulder tension, sometimes clenching fists, the jaw, teeth grinding, IBS, irritable bowel, what's happening from the gut point of view. And so this is just simple, like a body scan to go, actually, am I holding my stress? And that's when we go, right, what does that mean? And so, yes, there is good stress, but the bad stress is when we hold on to it. Can we let it go? And I love this story of, how animals, when they get chased and then they hide and then they just shake and they release the stress. So what they say, zebras don't get ulcers. There's a great book on that.
I've read that book. It's awesome.
So you just shake it off. And I often remind myself to shake it off, let it go, and not carry it, because our minds are just incredible. We just carry it, ruminate, and then it transpires into our body.
Yeah, wow, that's great. That's great. The glucose goddess slide was very interesting. I've had two experiences. I did a CGM experiment. I was the first glucose goddess. No joking. It was about 3 years ago. When they first came out, and I'm like,
yes,
I have to do it. And I did one. I tried 1 week. I only did 2 days, but I tried to do 1 week eating how I used to eat. The normal dietary guidelines. And the second, after 2 days, I felt so crap. I just went back to keto and just, was watching how it went. I got stressed when I went to the supermarket to go down the cereal aisle, because I had to buy the cereals I used to eat. And I'm watching my blood sugar go up, like, what the? Because I'm like, I can't buy oats. I don't want to buy it. I don't want to buy, Wheat Bix.
Yes.
Fantastic how
funny.
it goes to you. Yeah, it's funny. And the second same time I was wearing it, I had to get up to do some work with Nutrition Network, and I often get up, it's in the middle of the night, right? 1 o'clock in the morning. I think I had something on between 1 and 3. I didn't eat anything. I certainly didn't have coffee. I just had a water. But I think it went up to about 11.
Wow. And that's, this is the joy of continuous glucose monitoring. We can actually see it. It's almost hard to believe.
Yeah.
It's actually almost hard to believe. And especially one of my patients going through security in the airport, it was just hilarious. We were laughing about it, how his sugar just spiked after in anxiety. And then it just reminds us of that day-to-day experiences. What's actually spiking? What's actually happening in our body?
I remember posting about my experience, and it's interesting because I think a lot of practitioners find it confronting, because it is really, you can't hide behind it. But there was I got some from a couple of practitioners who I think were uncomfortable at my share, that, you're not type 2. Why are you doing this? This should be all only for people with type 1 or type 2. I'm like, isn't that interesting? You just don't want to see the data. So you'll try and, block it in any way that you can.
Which is a really good point, actually, because when I think about it, how many are actually pre-diabetic or insulin resistant?
Yep.
Why do we need to wait for type 2 to actually monitor? There's so much we can do beforehand. That's a really good reminder, Tracy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd like to sort of ask you, because we talked about this as being largely invisible, and I think a lot of it is that we have to take what is unconscious and bring it to our consciousness. And you talked about the reminders with the breathing. And I think the fact that this is, whether it's just that, but any change we want to make requires that level of conscious awareness. And it's almost exhausting over time in some way, because it's going so against obviously our natural patterns. So I was wondering if you had any insight around how we could kind of navigate it. Does it get easier? Is it just something we really just have to persist to do for how long? Like how does it look to you from what you've seen?
Yeah, I always say just start with tiny steps. And, it's, the first tiny step is to stop, have a moment to yourself. Maybe it's an hour in the week, and just journal and just reflect and go, what's my life looking like with the knowledge that I know now? What does that look like? Because I mentioned, like, we actually quite in automated mode, almost robotic, because we love routine. And you mentioned that as well. Daniel Levitin wrote that book, The Organized Mind, and it's just brilliant because there is a level of new information that we're trying to process every day, and then automation. And we've got to balance, because there's a limit that we can actually process in the day. So we actually love automating a lot of stuff. For example, even automating what we're eating, what we're buying, in terms of food. And, it's so automated. So it takes a lot of work to actually reflect and sort of say, okay, how do I balance that information? How can I reduce that stimuli? What more can I automate? But it takes work and commitment. So it starts with just 1 hour a week, just reflecting, sitting and going, okay, what one tiny thing can I change? And it's just one tiny thing. And the tiniest thing could be just breathing, just being aware of how you're breathing. And that is transformative. It's so simple, it's free, it's easy. And it's like, okay, let me put some post-it notes or cues or reminders of how am I breathing, and just go with that for a couple of months. And then the next, do another tiny reflection and go, okay, what's my next tiny step to take? I always say, Tracy, it's ongoing, always. You're never stopping. You're never stopping, because you can fall into bad habits. It's so easy. You've got a big project. It's so easy to go, I just need to get that done. So sleep goes, diet goes, all of that goes, and you're carrying your stress. And then you go, got to go back and just go, can I do this differently? Can I change the way we do projects? Can I change the way we respond to stress? It's so achievable, and it's so possible. It's our response to it.
Yeah, and seeing it's okay to take it one step at a time.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can't do everything all in one go. So maybe it's breath this month, maybe it's sleep next month. And what I like to say is just keep a little checklist once a month in your phone, a reminder, and go, okay, these are the things I need to just check. Am I still sleeping okay? Breathing? What am I eating? Am I moving? And keeping it just really simple. We need reminders, because
Yeah, we
it's,
do.
when we're immersed in that stressful situation, it's hard to think clearly.
Yep. Yeah. And not to obviously berate ourselves if we don't achieve what we want to achieve in that day, like that's the whole thing, isn't it? We kind of go off track, and then the mind throws up, well, what's the point now? You don't even, but it's not, it really is how we all work. And it's just about noticing and then choosing to realign whenever we've noticed that things have progressed. And of course, we're not perfect. I just think
Yeah.
that perfection, that's come up a couple of times. I mean, I think it's such a barrier. No one's perfect. We're all just doing the best to navigate it. But just saying that, yeah, it was the analogy of you'd never sit down and eat a whole elephant at once. Not that we
Yeah.
eat elephants, but just little bits at a
Yeah.
time is totally achievable. And the reminders, one of my clients had a connection in his mind about how every time he crossed the threshold of going into the bathroom, that became his opportunity to check his breathing, because we obviously go to the
Yeah,
bathroom a few times a day. Hey, I thought that
that's
was
a
a really
good
good
one.
idea.
Absolutely, that's a really good one. And it's just about enjoying the journey, giving yourself lots of compassion, and going, I'm here, meant to be here. And it's just moving forwards in a gentle, compassionate way, and just loving the journey of life, of just connecting the dots, everything that you're learning, just connecting and moving along. It's not about getting it right now or knowing everything now. It will unravel, and just allowing yourself to do that.
Yeah, being okay to be be the beginner. I just think that like I say, I'm the constant beginner in life, because it keeps me in that place of being curious, of learning more and seeing more, and that makes life really interesting and exciting. Hey,
Absolutely. It would be boring if we knew it all. It would be
yeah.
so boring.
Wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
If anyone has any questions for Shami, put any further questions, put them in while we wrap it up, because we have our coaches sitting in the green room now, all ready to finish up the summit with a great session on how to put all of this into practice. As Shami said, so much of what we do is subconscious, and we all have choices now. We can kind of close the laptop and walk away and continue doing things the way we're doing, or we can take a few things that we've gotten from the weekend and learn how to make them practical in our life and how to incorporate it in our life. And that's what I'm hoping that we're going to discuss next. So Shami, I'd love you to just to share any final words of wisdom or insights that you'd like to share with everyone watching.
Awesome. So first of all, just really congratulate yourselves, all of you, just for being here, turning up, wanting to learn, wanting to be curious. You're all into your health and you value your health so much. And it's just about the journey. So even if it's just one thing you pick up today, that makes a huge difference. And it's just building on that. And don't forget to nourish yourself. That's so important. And fill your cup first. That's my final thought.
Yeah, absolutely. So just love what you've shared, Shami. I know so many people who live busy and stressful live busy and stressful lives, and I just do not miss that in my own life. So obviously she's made the transition. I just thought too, I remember years and years ago when I was first came into the space, if you like, and becoming interested in my health. Mark Sisson said a quote that I've never forgotten, and his quote was, "Stress is the biggest barrier to fat adaptation."
I see that. I totally see that, because it's so invisible. It's hard to believe until you got data in front of you. Then you make change, because you're eating less, or the whole usual strategies. I see that every day, Tracy. That's so true.
Yeah, and it's so how you've seen it with the glucose monitor. It's just showing you right in the face that is exactly a big barrier, and big, it's like a puzzle piece. I think many of us avoid. The diet's kind of easier in a lot of ways, but let's also, stress the sleep. How many presenters have stressed the importance of sleep? I mean, Dr. Alex yesterday did a whole session on how sleep is so important, and it's almost like diet isn't better than one. Like, it's almost, these are pillars that are just as important alongside each other.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Sorry, someone's just made a comment. I think there is a myth out there that stress will make you skinny. I don't quite know how that could work, given we know the physiology of stress.
Exactly. Perhaps they're not eating. I don't know. There's so many ways.
Maybe that could be it. That could be one response, isn't it? Yes. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Shami, for coming and sharing your knowledge, insight, and wisdom. And of course, please look her up. She's a phenomenal teacher, and I would love to be on your podcast one day.
Excellent. Absolutely.
And I'll see you really soon. Thank you, Dr. Shami.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.